It was raining like the sky had a grudge that morning. Lena Cruz, soaked, flustered, and 5 minutes past late, darted toward a black car at the curb. With her phone dead and patience thinner than her dripping jacket, she slid into the back seat and barked directions like she owned the ride. Mismatched socks again, she laughed to herself, trying to break her own tension. The driver said nothing, just a nod, smooth as a secret. She rambled, unaware of the storm she was stirring in silence. Complaining about her chaotic morning, she made a joke about coffee tasting like betrayal and vented about Mondays feeling like plot twists in emotional story scripts.
Hello, I'm going to tell you this incredible story. Put on your headphones for a better experience and sit comfortably because you're going to be moved. Remember that to receive new stories like this, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the notification bell. Without further ado, let's get to the rest of the story.
The man driving glanced at her through the mirror, but didn't say a word. There was something polished in his stillness, something that didn't quite match the rideshare vibe. But Lena was too distracted to notice, her mind already tangled in new job nerves. The car stopped in front of Orion Enterprises, and Lena dashed in with a quick thanks, 5 stars. Clueless, she had just dropped emotional gold into the lap of someone who wasn't just anyone. Moments later, she entered the boardroom, squeezing into a chair, heart pounding. Then the room stilled. Eyes shifted to the door as the CEO made his grand entrance. And there he was, the Uber driver. The silence was louder than her mismatched socks. Her smile cracked into panic. That wasn't just a driver. That was Adrian Blackwell, the freshly appointed CEO of the very company where she'd just been hired. Time stopped. Breaths paused. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to blink in disbelief. Lena's stomach flipped like a scene from those real story moments that feel too absurd to be true. She shrank in her seat, feeling like she'd stepped into a live blooper reel. You'd think this was the end, right? That a facepalm mistake like that would send her packing. But Adrian didn't react with fury. No outburst. No awkward confrontation. Just a faint smirk. A kind of unspoken, let's see where this goes curiosity glimmered in his eyes. Lena, still clueless about what she'd just set into motion, tried to steady her breath. And that's where all truly began. Inside a moment that should have broken her, but quietly broke open something else. Adrian watched her closely during the meeting. Not with judgment, but with a curiosity that felt layered. Like a man who had just seen a trailer to a touching story and was wondering if the full film was worth watching. Lena, unaware of his gaze, tried to focus, praying the floor might just open up and swallow her whole. Yet, amidst the mortification, she remained. Lena, bright, flawed, funny. Her natural charm had already done something irreparable. And that's the beauty of some mistakes. They crack open doors we didn't even know existed. Lena's so-called blunder wasn't just a wrong car. It was a detour into destiny. Because when vulnerability collides with silence and spontaneity crashes into routine, real connections begin to form. But Lena didn't know that yet. All she knew was that the CEO was watching, and her career might have just taken its last breath. Lena barely slept that night. Her brain replayed every moment of her mistaken ride like a broken record, each second more cringe than the last. Walking into the office the next morning felt like entering a courtroom. She expected whispers, stares, maybe even a pink slip. But instead, she was greeted by Adrian's usual poker face and an assignment 10 times more complex than the first. She blinked at the email. This wasn't a punishment, it was a challenge. Analyze internal systems, streamline communications, and present to department heads? What? She half laughed, half panicked, thinking, did I just get promoted by mistake? It felt like she was living inside one of those touching stories people share online, the ones that start with a disaster and spiral into growth. But she took it. She had something to prove now. Each day brought a new test. A last-minute investor visit? She handled it. A broken presentation? She improvised. Adrian watched from a distance, quietly measuring her ability to rise under pressure. And she rose. All right, like she was running on pure adrenaline and spite. Her authenticity The very thing she feared would sink her became her most magnetic trait. The office couldn't help but notice. Her energy was contagious. She made even the stiffest boardroom moments feel lighter, human. Adrian, who usually operated like a machine, found himself anticipating her updates, her jokes, her offbeat metaphors that somehow always made sense. It was like watching the perfect real story unfold, one that didn't follow any professional playbook. And deep down, something was shifting, quietly, unpredictably. Then came the interview. A local tech reporter stopped by for a piece on Orion's culture. The scheduled speaker had food poisoning, and somehow Lena was pushed forward, unprepared. She spoke off the cuff, messy and brilliant, her words weaving an emotional story about innovation, chaos, and second chances. The clip went viral inside the company. People loved her. Adrian noticed and didn't hide it. Suddenly, Lena wasn't just the girl who mistook a CEO for a cabbie. She was a symbol of grit, of authenticity, of everything the company didn't know it needed. Her face started popping up in internal materials, her words quoted in meetings. Some colleagues rolled their eyes, but most leaned in. It wasn't the fame that mattered. It was the feeling that she belonged, that she'd earned it, stumble by stumble. And somewhere between the headlines and handshakes, something deeper was forming. A tension that wasn't just professional anymore. Their paths kept crossing, and every interaction felt charged, unsaid. Adrian wasn't just watching her succeed, he was invested. But with blurred lines come blurred intentions. And Lena was starting to wonder if what she felt in the air was real, or just wishful thinking. Pressure became the new normal. Lena now juggled spreadsheets, strategy decks, and impromptu dinners like a circus performer in heels. Adrian's request became more layered. Less about proving skill, more about earning trust. He gave her tasks no one else dared to touch. Decoding flawed financial reports, mediating between feuding departments. It felt personal, not just professional. Like he was trying to see if she'd break or bend and shine. She didn't just survive, she thrived. Her instincts turned crises into creative solutions. During one investor dinner, when the projector failed, Lena spun a pitch from memory, tying numbers to real story moments that hit like poetry. Adrian, seated beside her, gave the smallest nod, the kind that said volumes. In that moment, they weren't just colleagues, they were a team. A quiet alliance was forming in the spaces between their words. The contrast between them was striking. Lena, full of energy, unpredictable, always with a metaphor up her sleeve. Adrian, measured, composed, precise like a Swiss watch. But somehow, their opposites didn't clash, they balanced. She brought color to his grayscale world. He gave structure to her chaos. It was like one of those emotional story arcs where connection blooms not from similarity, but from perfect dissonance. They started reading each other without speaking. A glance across the room, a subtle eyebrow raise, silent codes that said more than 1,000 words. Lena found herself memorizing the rhythm of his voice, and Adrian, once unreadable, seemed to soften in her presence. These weren't office dynamics anymore. This was something else, something raw, something neither of them could name without risking everything. It wasn't loud, this growing bond. It lived in moments. When she stayed late and he brought her tea, when she cracked a joke and he laughed with his eyes. When their hands brushed accidentally and neither pulled away. There was a tenderness there, so fragile it felt sacred. Like the kind of touching stories people whisper about but rarely live themselves. And neither wanted to break it by saying too much. Still, silence can be confusing. Lena wasn't sure if this connection was mutual or just her heart playing tricks. Adrian's poker face never slipped for long. Every smile could be strategy. Every compliment a test. She began to overthink. What did it mean when he called her indispensable? When he stood beside her instead of across the table? Her feelings were real, but were his? And just like that, the line between work and something deeper blurred completely. She wasn't too far to back out now. Their partnership wasn't just about the company anymore. It was layered, delicate, loaded with subtext. Every late night felt like a page from an emotional story she didn't remember writing. And deep down, She knew something had to give. Something would shift. The only question was, when? Just when Lena thought the unspoken bond between them would finally find its voice, Adrian changed. He pulled back. Not rudely, not suddenly, but with the kind of distance that confuses more than it clarifies. No more late-night debriefs. No more shared glances in meetings. It was like watching a door quietly close without explanation. And for Lena, it felt like being erased from a story she thought she was co-writing. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was busy, overwhelmed, back to being the CEO who couldn't afford to feel. But it hurt. Deep. It wasn't just professional rejection. It was emotional whiplash. How could someone go from soft laughter to polite indifference so quickly? Lena spiraled between anger and self-doubt. She wondered if it had all been in her head, just another emotional story she'd told herself to survive the chaos. One evening, she confronted him. No script, no safety net, just raw emotion and a hallway lit by flickering lights. "If this is just work to you," she whispered, "I need to know." Adrian stood frozen, then finally spoke. Not with authority, but with truth. He confessed the battle inside him, the need to protect the company, and the fear of what loving her could cost. It was honesty that cut deeper than silence ever could. Their conversation didn't fix everything, but it cracked the ice. Instead of texts, he started writing letters. Real ones, the kind that feel like they're meant to be kept. Lena responded with gestures, coffee waiting at his desk, a joke scribbled on a sticky note. They were both awkward and cautious, like people trying to dance without stepping on each other's pain. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Then came the company gala. A big event, high stakes. Lena walked in stunning, radiant. Not because of her dress, but because she had finally decided to stop hiding her light. Adrian saw her across the room and paused, as if remembering the woman who once jumped into his car by mistake. During his speech, he lost his place, but Lena stepped in with a joke, saving the moment like she'd always done. As they laughed, something shifted. Maybe it was the fall. Yes, she tripped over a mic cord and nearly took Adrian down with her. Or maybe it was the way he caught her, both of them laughing, holding on longer than necessary. Either way, the crowd cheered, but something more private happened in that fall. It was messy, unexpected, and real, like all the best parts of a real story worth remembering. From that night on, their connection was no longer tucked between the lines. It lived in plain sight, in glances, touches, and unfinished sentences. But even as their rhythm returned, there was still one thing missing. One final step they hadn't taken. And Lena, for all her strength, couldn't stop wondering, would he ever say it out loud? Would this story finally get its ending? Or just fade like so many emotional stories before? Weeks passed, and the rhythm between them settled into something soft and intentional. Lena stopped overthinking, and Adrian started showing up, not just physically, but emotionally. It wasn't a grand declaration or some movie-worthy speech. It was the way he waited for her after meetings, the way he remembered tiny details she never said out loud. Their love wasn't loud. It was steady, like a heartbeat behind every real story worth telling. Then came the rooftop. Clear skies, a soft breeze, and Lena standing where it all unknowingly began, waiting. Adrian had told her they were just there for a new branding photo shoot, but his eyes told a different story. He held her hands, smiled nervously, and said, "Let's make chaos a tradition." When he knelt down and opened the box, Lena's breath caught. It wasn't just a proposal. It was a full-circle moment. The rain from their first meeting, recreated by timed sprinklers. The car they'd laughed in, parked behind them. Adrian had planned every detail, not for spectacle, but for meaning. From the wrong car to the right forever, he whispered. It was the kind of emotional story that felt scripted by fate, but written in quiet gestures. And Lena? She said yes with tears, mismatched socks and all. Their wedding was everything they weren't expected to have. Simple, intimate, full of laughter and bad dancing. No grand ballroom, no polished performance. Just two people who had fought through silence, mistakes, and misunderstandings to arrive at something real. People cried, laughed, and whispered that it felt like one of those touching stories passed down through generations. The kind that didn't just talk about love, but proved it. In the vows, Lena spoke about that rainy morning, about how life rarely gives you signs, but always gives you moments. I was late, my phone was dead, and somehow, the universe said, just go with it. Adrian, in turn, spoke of chaos becoming clarity, of how one spontaneous woman reminded him that leadership without heart is just control. And in that moment, there wasn't a single dry eye left. Their story became company legend. New hires heard it during onboarding. Investors chuckled about it during retreats. It became the heart of Orion's culture, proof that the unexpected can become unforgettable. The emotional story behind their love became more than gossip. It became a symbol of what happens when you stop trying to control the narrative and just live it, fully, boldly, together. But beyond the story, beyond the viral whispers and heartfelt smiles, Lena and Adrian kept one thing sacred: the simplicity of loving each other every single day. The ride was never smooth, but it was theirs. And sometimes, the most powerful real story starts not with fireworks, but with a mistake, a laugh, and a heart brave enough to believe it means something more. And now, I have to ask, have you ever had a moment where a mistake led you somewhere completely unexpected? Do you believe that chaos can lead to connection, or that love can grow in the most unplanned places? Would you have kept your cool like Lena, or panicked and run for the hills? Tell me in the comments, because your story might just be the next emotional story someone needs to hear. And hey, if this real story touched you, make sure to hit that like button, share it with someone who still believes in fate, and of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We've got more touching stories coming your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss them.